Russian attacking with a mix of old T-72 tanks and new T-84s. Ukrainian troops advance in Kupiansk. Ukrainian forces are under relentless assault in two critical sectors of Russia's 33-month wider war on Ukraine. In western Russia's Kursk Oblast, currently the locus of the fighting, around 20,000 Ukrainian troops are struggling to hold back at least 50,000 Russians, as well as thousands of North Koreans. In southern Donetsk Oblast, in eastern Ukraine, a few battalions of exhausted Ukrainian regulars, each with no more than 400 soldiers, are desperately trying to avoid encirclement by a division of Russian motor rifle troops. The balance of forces in this sector might be 5-1 in favor of the Russians. The brigade rides in an eclectic mix of armored vehicles, including modern Ukrainian-made T-84 Oplat tanks, and even newer captured Russian T-72B3s. Tanks from the Ukrainian 4th National Guard Brigade, possibly up-armored 1970s, vintage T-72Bs, have also been active along the Kupiansk axis. In one recent video circulated by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, one of the Guard tanks engaged entrenched Russian troops at point-blank range, firing steadily with its 125mm cannon as it slowly rolled away from the trench, its crew clearly counting on constant movement to complicate any return fire. The liberation of Kupiansk is rare good news for Kyiv's outnumbered and outgunned army as the winter sets in and U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's January inauguration looms. Trump has vowed to end the war in Ukraine. His proposal to freeze the front line in place would cede to Russia more than 10% of Ukrainian territory. The Russians aren't giving up on Kupiansk. If they can't fully capture the city, they might settle for consolidating their positions along the Oskil River, which threads through Kupiansk and largely defines the front line in the area. Meanwhile, the Russians are going for broke and accepting massive casualties. Daily tallies of dead and wounded Russians now routinely exceed 1,500. Total Russian casualties, after 33 months of wider warfare in Ukraine, are somewhere between 600,000 and 730,000. Many of the deaths are the unavoidable price Russia pays for being on the offensive along much of the 800-mile front line of the 33-month wider war. Exposed attackers almost always suffer greater casualties than dug-in defenders. Nick Reynolds, an analyst with the Royal United Services Institute in London, explained the Russian armed forces' underlying problems in October. The full-scale invasion of Ukraine has been a bruising debacle for Russia's ground forces. Despite staving off outright defeat in 2022 and 2023, the quality of its units degraded due to attrition. The same goes for armored forces, which are not currently competitive against the mix of precise lethal systems that are fielded by both sides in Ukraine. Tanks might work as improvised howitzers, firing from the relative safety of positions miles from the enemy, but they suffer when brought closer to the front line. Due to Russia's military culture and comprehensive neglect of its personnel, Reynolds concluded operations are at best unwieldy and more often simply unimplementable with the force available. Moscow's shocking losses come as Vladimir Putin's army seeks to seize as much territory as possible, ahead of Donald Trump's imminent return to the White House, with both sides expecting Washington to push for ceasefire talks early next year. Although their ranks are suffering heavy casualties, the Russian army is advancing westward in Ukraine at a rate faster than any other time after the initial days of the 2022 invasion, taking an area half the size of London over the past month. Putin's troops swept through swathes of Ukraine in early 2022 and were bearing down on Kyiv in a matter of days. But they were held on the outskirts of the capital before being pushed back and retreating further east. The war is now entering what some Russian and Western officials say could be its most dangerous phase weeks before Trump returns to the Oval Office, amid fears he could dramatically reduce aid to Ukraine as he seeks to force a ceasefire deal. North Korean troops are reported to be bolstering Moscow's forces, and Kyiv is now using Western-supplied missiles to strike back inside Russia, a development that prompted Putin to unleash a never-before-seen Oreshnik hypersonic missile last week.